So guys, it's the first day of a brand new month. I hope February was a fantastic one for you, and I hope that March is even better. And if you're anything like me, you'll be sitting there today wondering, where the hell has the time gone? How are we already in March, and how has it been a whole year since the start of the pandemic? In any case, this week in the UK is a very important one, as was last week. So you'll remember last week we had the roadmap for how we're going to get out of the lockdown situation and back to some sort of normality. And this week is all about how we're going to do that with the finances, the government's finances. How are we going to get them back to being relatively normal? Because on Wednesday, the UK Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, will be unveiling one of the UK's most anticipated budgets in recent history. Now, why is it so highly anticipated? Well, obviously because over the past year, UK government borrowing has exploded. And based on the latest figures from the Office of National Statistics, in the current financial year, the government borrowed over £270 billion, which is a 555% increase over the same period from the previous year. So a huge increase, therefore taking debt to GDP levels to the highest since the 1960s. Now we can see before the pandemic hit, the government's borrowing had been on a decline for the past decade, but as we can see, the measures taken to tackle the virus pushed borrowing back to extremely high levels. And around £70 billion of that borrowing was just for the furlough scheme alone. But that scheme also helped businesses to retain staff and avoid even higher levels of unemployment. So perhaps a smaller price to pay than what could have been. And look, it's my view that an economy like the UK should be borrowing more in a situation like this. When we look at the cost of doing so, it seems like the obvious choice right now. But in any case, let's focus on the topic at hand and on what's likely to happen on Wednesday. Now, there's no doubt that at some point, the government will want to tighten the budget deficit, and they were probably hopeful that it would happen this financial year. The problem is, though, the UK is still feeling the effects of the pandemic, and during Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister's speech last week, he promised not to pull the rug out from under the economy. So basically, this sounds a lot like fiscal support will remain in some form, but he isn't giving any details yet, perhaps saving them for Rishi Sunak on Wednesday. Now, alongside the recent roadmap announcement, extending fiscal support until the economy is back on its feet would make sense and would be the logical thing to do. So the government also probably wants to avoid mistakes that they've made in the past. For example, after the financial crisis, austerity measures were introduced fairly quickly, and that undermined the UK economic recovery. So this time they may want to take a bit more of a slower approach in balancing the budget. But that doesn't mean that this year's fiscal spending will be at the same level as it was last year. There's a good chance that some things will change to increase government income and reduce expenditure. There are some expectations that a few of the existing schemes will come to an end in March, including bounce-back loans for companies. However, there's also said to be a new type of government-backed business loan which is designed to replace some of the current emergency schemes. Another change that's expected is raising corporation tax later this year up to 20% and then up to 23% over the next few years, which would reportedly bring in an additional £3 billion this year and £12 billion over the next 3. There's also discussion about a digital tax, as online businesses have typically fared better than the high street during all of this. But the UK isn't looking to go alone with this and will be pushing it through the G7 and the G20 to find an international agreement for that. Now, one of the big things that businesses have been calling for is an extension to the costly furlough scheme, and Rishi Sunak did hint towards this during a Sky News interview over the weekend.
Well, when it comes to support in general, I said at the beginning of this crisis that I would do whatever it took to protect people, families and businesses through this crisis, and I remain completely committed to that. The Prime Minister in the roadmap set out a path for us to recover and reopen, and I want to support people and businesses along that path.
So it's going to be extended.
I'm not going to comment on specific policies, but I want to make sure people realise that we are going to be there to support them. And if you look at our track record, we went big, we went early, and there's more to come next week. With regard to airports, for example, they had a generous break on their business rates over this past year. The furlough scheme I know has been helpful for many people employed in that industry. I know how difficult it is, and I want them to have the reassurance that we are here to keep supporting people as we reopen the economy.
But Andy wants specific reassurance on the furlough scheme?
Well, Wednesday is budget when we'll set out the next step of everything. But Andy and others, hopefully will have had reassurance over the past year, knowing that we've done absolutely everything we can to support businesses, families and people through this crisis. And we remain, as you can see by today's announcement, supporting our high street businesses, committed to that goal.
So during Q2, there may be an extension to the furlough scheme, but we will also see some new schemes as well. Some of the rumours point towards tax cuts and VAT cuts for some industries such as hospitality and £5 billion for the Restart programme in order to maintain the post-pandemic recovery. Now, we won't know for sure until Wednesday, so just be aware that there's likely to be volatility in UK assets during and following the announcement because no one can be sure exactly what's going to be announced. And on screen here we can see GBP to USD, this is the weekly chart. We've been edging up recently, and last week we actually struggled with the post-referendum peak, and this is a critical point for the pound in terms of the technicals at least, to see whether we're going to continue that bullish trend and gain a bit of momentum there. So as well as what's being announced, we're also going to be listening for any potential forward guidance on future tax moves and also what's happening to support jobs and businesses throughout the second quarter and the rest of the year. What's the economic outlook right now, since we know that most decisions are going to be data driven rather than based on specific dates. Sunak, as you'd expect, has been quiet about tax for now because of course he would until the budget announcement, but he definitely doesn't shy away from doing his victory laps, does he? It's just a shame that he's never willing to answer any questions on the repercussions of his Eat Out to Help Out scheme or the forgotten 3 million. There are people that are struggling out there. But then again, what do you expect? Anyway, what are you expecting from the budget this week? What do you make of the government's handling of the finances during the pandemic? Was it good? Was it bad? What's good about it? What's bad about it? Let me know in the comments. I always love reading your thoughts as well. And thank you so much for watching. Take care. I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.